Well, hello, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. My name is Ian, and I'm joined by Ken and Paul, and together we are your marketing guides. Today, we're talking about a topic of understanding the importance of strategy before tactics and how this can set your small business up for success or failure if you don't pay attention to it. So, Paul, I'm going to jump in and ask you the first question, but I think this is a great place to start is to define and explain the difference between what a marketing strategy is and what marketing tactics are. And I thought it would actually be helpful because these terms actually come from the military, really. If you look historically where strategy and tactics came from, it was a military expression. So maybe you can start there by explaining the difference between the two, because I think that actually will help people understand then, as we transition into marketing, how it applies there as well.
Interesting that I got this question.
I thought it was suitable.
Well, we always talk about strategy first. And the reason for that, so if you want to go to your military analogy, if you're talking about a theater of operations, you have to have a strategy before you can implement anything. You don't just send troops into a situation without figuring out what that situation is, what the obstacles are, what situations you're going to encounter, and nothing's ever perfect. No military engagement has ever survived confrontation with the enemy. Okay, that's something that's always been said. But you have to have a strategy. You have to know what is happening, what the potential situations are. If you look at Desert Storm, that was years of planning before they ever did anything. A lot of people don't realize that they had conducted war games and looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of possible scenarios before they ever did anything. They had special operations forces on the ground collecting data and reconnaissance for about 6 months before anyone knew that we were even there. So how that relates to marketing is you have to have a strategy, and part of that strategy is where do I stand in relation to my competitors? What are my competitors doing? What are they ranking for? What am I ranking for and not ranking for? What is my social media presence? All these different things. And you have to have that in place before you can have a plan of action. So if you're a plumber and water heater installation is something that's very profitable for you and you want to rank for that and you're not, and you have 3 competitors that are outranking you, then that's going to be a completely different tactic than if you want to rank for emergency plumbing and you only have one competitor that's slightly outranking you. Because if you want to rank for something and you're on like page 3 for that search term, you're going to have to invest some time and money and effort into ranking for that. So I don't know if that fits the analogy of what you wanted, but yeah, you have to have the strategy that this is where I am, this is where my competitors are, and I want to rank for this search term, and I'm on page 4. So how much time and effort is it going to take me to rank for that? And maybe should I start trying to rank for some longer tail keywords before I start ranking for the more search for terms? Because that's something else you have to look at, is search volume. If something has a huge amount of search volume, it's probably going to be more difficult to rank for that term.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I developed software for the Department of Defense, and while I never served, I did spend a lot of time, working in the military mindset. And there's a great phrase called situational awareness. And to the extent that you can have situational awareness, you can dominate. If you don't have situational awareness, you can't dominate. You might win, but it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be as efficient as it could have been. And so, what I like to think about marketing strategy doing for you is it starts out by giving you that situational awareness. Where do you stand in terms of messaging, in terms of, um, you know, rankings, advertising, all of this stuff in comparison with the overall landscape, your competitors, what are customers looking for, all of that kind of stuff. And to me, it's just it's kind of something that I think a lot of people forget about and overlook. And I just think it's an incredibly important phrase that people need to stop and always think about. I mean, it even applies when you're driving on a highway. You've got to have
Sure.
situational awareness. You've got to be paying. You got to have things that are monitoring what is going on around you, so that you can, have the best chance of surviving. And that's really ultimately what marketing is all about: is survival.
Yeah. 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 And I think Paul, you did a great job of explaining it. I think the key for me in sharing, when I'm talking with people, they're always drawn to tactics because tactics are loud. We're all being bombarded by marketing tactics. And so this idea of, okay, if we were to look at it from a military standpoint, and we have a goal, we have a very clear goal, right? As a if you have to go to war, or if you have a battle, you need to understand that this is my objective. We are here to win the war because there's a very big cost if we don't do that, right? And then you have a big picture approach to achieving that goal, and these are the strategies that we're going to employ in order to achieve our objective. And understanding who you're up against. And we'll transition into a business side here in a minute, but I think this is a really important concept, because if you don't do this, if you don't understand, first of all, what your why is, like why does my business exist, and understand that you are in, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I've heard the term before because it comes from the sporting world, where people say, "Hey, just play your own game. Play your own game, guys. Don't get caught into whatever they're doing." And there's truth in that, but the teams that win are the teams that understand their competition. And for a dentist, for a roofer, for a restaurant, you need to understand what your competition is doing, because essentially you're all trying to attract the same people to some degree, right? There might be niching, there might be specific types of demographics you're trying to attract that might be different than your competition, but you wouldn't even know that either unless you focus on high level strategy. And then the tactics are okay, what are we going to do now in order to achieve those strategies that will help us achieve our goals, right? It's a multi-tiered approach. But what I often see, and I think you guys from our discussions have seen before too, is that people skip this important step. And when they do, it just kind of sets them up for disaster, I think.
Well, and I think part of the reason that small business owners focus on tactics is that it's kind of their mindset, or entrepreneur's mindset, is my competitor's outranking me. We need to do something. And so you wind up with shiny object syndrome, or, throwing mud against the wall, seeing what sticks. And like you said, they skip that whole strategy. And when you, like you said, when you do that, you wind up with a disaster. There's a reason they spent 6 months doing recon before they went in.
Right.
They knew exactly what they were up against, and that's how they were. Well, aside from we just overwhelmingly overpowered them, they
Right.
knew exactly what they were up against, and they knew exactly what they had to do. And
they did that because the cost would be too great if they didn't do that, right?
exactly. And that applies to marketing as well. If you just start randomly doing things, you're not going to get the results that you want. And strategy takes time and it takes money. And I think that's the other thing. A lot of small look, money's finite, budgets are finite. And you come along and say, well, we need to spend 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is, developing a strategy. They're like, well, no, let's just do something. They don't want to spend that money and they want to skip that. And that's understandable. But if you look at it from a long-term perspective, that strategy is going to save you money in the long term.
Yeah. Hey, I think this transitions well into the next question I have, which is for Ken. This is a really important concept because if businesses don't get this part right, big problems can happen, as we already said. Can you share why it's so important? And can you also share the problems a business will face if they don't incorporate strategy first?
Yeah. So first of all, I think most people want to buy tactics because it's easier to learn and understand a tactic. Oh, I got a phone call from somebody who told me that I needed to do this. Okay. Because they're not experts in this. And unfortunately, most marketing companies sell tactics. They don't sell strategy. And I want to go back as I answer your question. I want to kind of go back and talk about this whole situational awareness as it relates to the sports analogy. That that's watching the game film. That's going back and seeing what your competitors are doing, seeing what you're doing, making sure you're playing your game, but also seeing what competitors are doing. And the reason that teams win is because they can play their own game, but they're playing their own game because they've studied it and how it works against the competition in advance. Yeah. And so, that's what marketing strategy allows you to do. And, so if you get it right, it's going to align, your business goals and objectives with the marketing initiatives and strategies that you're putting in place. It's going to allow you to prioritize and set resources properly. It's going to give you information to make better decisions and more timely decisions. It's going to allow you to focus your money by reaching the right target audience at the right time. And it's going to, all of this ultimately, I think, rolls up into customer experience and gives you a better opportunity for success, not only with your individual marketing tactics, but if you're doing that right, and you've incorporated strategy efficiently to address customer experience, then that's a really critical component. So if issues that you face is you're going to spend a lot of money trying this, trying that, probably trying it by itself. Hey, I sent a postcard to, these people and I didn't get a single call. You sent one postcard, that's a tactic, not a strategy. You help to eliminate wasting money. Again, I ran Google Ads and I signed up for, the $150 free Google ad spend that you get when you first create an account or whatever it is. And I'm sure that that's probably changed and updated, but that's the one that always sticks in my mind because I think that's one of the worst things that Google could have ever done to get people into the Google ad program, because that's all they're going to spend and they're not going to get results. And so they're going to walk away and say, well, that didn't work. Well, in this case, they didn't waste their money, but they did waste time and effort. And they wasted, Google's credit. So it didn't really help them out. This is huge. And this is the thing that I don't know anybody that I talk to on a regular basis who sees it this way, but it's so important. And that is the lost opportunity. While you're targeting the wrong people or using a bad tactic, that business that you could have and maybe should have had went elsewhere. That's huge opportunity lost costs. And every business needs to think about that. If you're, regardless of your business, if you're letting your competitors go get that business when it could have been yours, if you just would have dialed in and put the strategy and then the subsequent tactics in place, huge deal. Most businesses never, ever, ever think about that. I like, if you have a strategy in place and you've got you're putting in place the metrics and the things that give you situational awareness of what's happening within your own marketplace, buying behaviors, and are Google ads still working for your business the way that they were? Do you need to tweak this? Do you need to tweak that? You have the ability to adapt and change. Ultimately, you're gonna get more, I think, more effectiveness, and I'm going to say it, more force multiplier efforts on your marketing budget.
Yeah, yeah, those are great points. And one of the ideas that popped into my head that I think is worth sharing, and it was either something you said or Paul said earlier, was that activity does not equal success, right? And we that idea of jumping into something just because the doing feels good. It feels like I'm moving my business forward by investing in a tactic that lots of people, the noise is saying it's going to work. It just feels like motion, right? It's almost the equivalent of, even though it might not be the fastest route to where I'm going, I just want to keep going because I don't want to be stuck in a traffic jam or something, right?
Right.
It's that feeling that we as business owners have, that motion is better than taking a step back, thinking through and planning out, this is what we should be doing, here's why, and here's how we're going to achieve success. I think that's a really important idea, and I love you bringing in force multiplication as well as the idea of lost opportunities. I mean, especially because SEO is part of a tactic that we use to help people with the strategy of showing up in the top of Google rankings, because that drives people to their website, right? So that commonly comes up is that businesses don't realize that if they don't get on the bus fast, it's that ancient saying that when is the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, because you could be enjoying its shade now.
Yeah.
But then the second best time is right now, right? So
Right. Yeah.
because you're losing all those opportunities.
Yeah, because other people are already on the bus.
That's right.
And something Ken said that I think is important is the ability to change. You collect data, you develop a strategy, and maybe things don't work the way you thought or the way you planned, so you change. And going back to the sports analogy, you see this a lot of times. If you look at football, if you're a team that runs the ball really well and you're playing a team that has one of the best run defenses in the league, and you can't run the ball, well, maybe you need to start doing some short underneath passes to pull them off the line, and then you can start running the ball. So you have to adapt your strategy to what happens.
Yeah.
And that applies in marketing as well.
And excellent timing as we get closer to the Super Bowl for that analogy. I was thinking of that too, Paul, that I was actually watching some highlights of my favorite basketball team from a game last night. And
Who is it?
It happens to be the Toronto Raptors. I'm based close to Toronto, and it's the Raptors, and they won, a few years ago, and blah. Anyways, what I found fascinating though is they were one of the top defensive teams this year so far, and then it started to slip recently. And I was watching the highlights of the most recent game from last night, and what fascinated me was it's just what you were talking about, Ken, with preparation and situational awareness. Is you could tell that the Utah Jazz had just slightly moved they had watched the film, they had seen where Toronto likes to slide passes through in order to get 3-point shots, and they started to pick these off in the first quarter like clockwork, because they had prepared very well for how Toronto's passing game was. And then you could see once the game started to move on, that Toronto had adapted and they changed how they were passing, and they started to get those shots again. But to me, that was just a real key visual representation of, you have to prepare, and then you have to be adaptable.
Yeah. Well, and a great example of that, I think, in the marketing world is, okay, well, I don't need to be doing as much marketing because I rank on the first page. Well, guess what? there are other companies that are out there that want that business. And
Absolutely.
if you're just sitting still, they're adapting and they're investing, and they may very quickly and easily overtake you if you're not paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah. And COVID, during COVID, to me, that was a prime example of that too, where all of a sudden businesses were like, I can't sell to anyone for maybe a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months. And we saw, because we had already been working with clients for several years, we actually, because we're monitoring, again, we're using data to help inform the decision making and be adaptable. We were watching as competitors started to invest in things that we'd been investing in already. So it allowed us to, yes, stay ahead of them, but definitely the space between us started to diminish because they woke up, right? They started to, so you can't sit on your hands. You can't think, my place is secure, especially in a competitive environment with all sorts of, different pressures. Like right now we have the economic pressure of inflation, right? And that's changing people's behavior. And we're coming out of a COVID bubble where people didn't spend on travel, but they spent on their homes. So home services are seeing a drop to some degree, and there's always pressures. So you have to be smart about investing in your future today rather than scrambling and trying to find money that doesn't exist when it's later in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long is this internet fad thing going to last anyway?
So, Paul, how does a marketing strategy help a business? What are the true benefits to them?
Well, I guess the short answer is it keeps you from wasting money on tactics, like we said,
Yeah.
But it helps you clarify what needs to be done, because we've also seen that sometimes you're spending money on the wrong things, or maybe you do something really well, but there's something, maybe after the sale, or or after you complete a project, you're really good at following up, saying, how do we do, could we improve? But maybe you're not so good at following up after the initial contact. Well, that's a problem, because that's how you get the job, and you need to improve on that. So it helps you clarify what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and what you need to do better and work on and improve on, and that helps you better allocate resources. Things like efficiency, marketing automation. There are a lot of things that a lot of small businesses aren't taking advantage of any kind of automation, and there's a lot of redundant things that people do, within that within the office, that have to be done, that can be automated, and that increases efficiency. And if you increase efficiency, you increase your ROI. So the marketing strategy helps you be more efficient with pretty much any tactic that you're going to employ. And I think that's really the condensed version of it. But yeah, if you, going back to automation, something we have is the missed call text back. Someone calls into the office, and people are busy. Small businesses, they don't have an unlimited staff, and they may have one person that's answering the phones. And so someone calls in and they can't answer that phone call, then the potential customer that called in immediately gets a text saying, hey, we're sorry we missed your call. We'll be in touch soon, or whatever it says. But that helps keep them from going to a competitor, because if they call in, they don't get an answer, that they'll just move on next. But if they immediately get a response saying, hey, we're sorry we missed your call, we're going to get back to you shortly, and then 2-3 minutes later they get a phone call, that helps increase the trust level. At least I think it does, because they're like, okay, this business actually cares if they if they care that much that they send me a text saying, sorry, we missed your call, and then 3 minutes later I get a call back, that increases the trust level.
Yeah. 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 When I think about the benefits to businesses too, I think of ROI, return on investment, of course, because you actually know what to invest in, you know what to measure, and you know what to do to get more out of it in an ongoing way, right? The other thing I think of when I think strategy, and I've seen this played out many, many times, is that it's a crap filter. It's like a crappy marketing filter, for your business fish tank. You like, I can't tell you the number of times my clients have either used us and used our strategy as a filter to drown out the noise, to say, you know what, this is noise. Yes, my competitors are doing this, but it's dumb because it doesn't fit our strategy. And if they didn't have that, if they didn't have us as essentially a support system to them to help them discern through the strategy what makes sense to invest in and what doesn't, because sometimes a good idea does come along and you can add it into your strategy, right? Yes, this is a tactic that actually helps us reach our goals. We can tell that. But I can't tell you the number of times that clients have come to me and said, Ian, I think we need to do this. And so we look at it and we go, no, like, here's the reason why you shouldn't do this. It's very noisy. It's very popular. Right now, TikTok advertising, or even just organic TikTok, for the last 2 years has been massive, right? The noise out there. And maybe it's a good tactic for your strategy. Maybe it's not. But if you don't have the filter of your strategy to help determine to guide your thinking through that, of how to say, here's how it's going to help us achieve our goal, then you're just going to chase the next shiny object. The tyranny of the urgent, as Stephen Covey talked about it, right, in his book. You don't want to be at the mercy of the tyranny of the urgent or the latest shiny object. Ken, from your experience, how big a problem is this tactics before strategy? Are we talking a small percentage of businesses you come across, or is this an epidemic in small business? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I know statistics show that it's more than 3/4 of businesses really don't have a marketing strategy or plan in place. Experientially, doing this since 2005, I'll tell you, I can't think of maybe one or two customers or clients of ours that actually had done some strategy work in the past. And look, just because you do the strategy work, it doesn't stop there. It has to roll into effective tactics. So,
absolutely.
Okay, yeah, you define your personas, you set your goals, you know what you want to accomplish, but then you pick a lot of crappy tactics to get there. That doesn't work either. I think it's again, it's interesting because most business owners have an entrepreneurial spirit of some kind, right? That's why they started their business, and they're doers, as Paul said. They want to go get shit done. That's just the mindset, and you want to be making progress. You want to keep moving forward, and so I think it's very much the nature of businesses to want to try to take some action. In some cases, that action may be that they've decided to take inaction because they've been burned in the past. And so they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything then because whatever I've tried has been bad. And then you layer on top of that, I think the overwhelming majority of marketing companies, I'm in a bunch of different groups, on Facebook or, through other networking groups where I see a lot of discussions from a lot of different people who are in marketing. They almost always talk about a tactic or a small set of tactics that they do. There's actually training to tell people, just go pick that one good thing that you're really good at doing and just go sell that because it's easier to sell that. And you know what? They're right. It is easier to sell one thing because you know, but you're losing the big picture situational awareness and the ability to put those sensors in place to really help you create the robust, adaptable, and winnable strategy that you need to have in place. So uh, unfortunately for a lot of business owners, look, the cards are stacked against you. I realize why you all have a really negative opinion in general of most marketing companies, because I think most marketing companies have done you a disservice. They may still have gotten some results for you, and that's great. But I think too often times it's a tactic led, and I absolutely agree with the statistic that it's at least 3/4, and maybe even higher than that, where people use a tactics based approach instead of a strategy. Again, I mean, it's like, oh well, I advertised in the newspaper, and I mean, it started with Yellow Pages. Well, Yellow Pages worked for a while, and that was right maybe before the world and marketing got fragmented. And that's the thing. People need to realize marketing is now fragmented. It's not like three channels. It used to be TV, radio, and Yellow Pages. Guess what? It hadn't been that way for decades. So, Mark,
And
with the
newspapers,
internet,
don't forget newspapers.
oh, and newspapers, sorry, and magazines, but print.
Yeah,
But, I mean, you're talking about 3 to 5. Now you're
yeah,
talking about literally thousands of different things that you can do. Different tools that do different things, and really probably 20 to 30 channels that have good viability for certain businesses when used in a certain way in a certain situation. And so, just like me, I wouldn't have a clue how to put a roof on a house. Um, you know,
you
I'm
could YouTube it, man. Yeah,
yeah,
you'd be fine.
yeah, yeah. Um, No, thanks. I don't. I realize why. I realize why we're in that situation, and part of what I think we've always wanted to try to do with this podcast is just kind of address that and give. I'm a small business owner too. I want to give my clients tools to help them succeed. That's what I want to do. I'm an educator. I've always been an educator, and and so this idea of strategy before tactics is critical.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking when you were talking there, Ken, is because you were describing it, but the term I often I don't know if I created this term or if I read it somewhere, but it's the large S strategy and the small S strategy. And one of the things I find is, because you were talking about how many marketing businesses just talk about tactics. But one of the really confusing things to businesses, and I've had to talk people through this a little bit so they understand it, is they talk about small S strategy, not big S strategy,
Yeah.
meaning they're not talking about developing a strategic marketing plan. They're talking about, okay, within Facebook advertising, because that's a tactic they're selling, we have a strategy. And I think that really confuses people, because of course you have to have there's multiple levels of developing strategy, and you have tactical strategies and you have overarching strategies. But I think that's terribly confusing to people, because the language, marketers are pretty smart at being presenting an idea well, and making it compelling. And sometimes I think that term of strategy is used a little bit carelessly, and creates expectations for the business owner that, wow, I'm getting a strategy, but
Yeah.
it's not what they think it is.
Yeah. I would just say, marketing is not a one-dimensional thing anymore.
Yeah.
And, so for those of you out there watching or listening, when somebody's talking to you and it's a one-dimensional thing, and social media is a one-dimensional thing, even if they're talking about using Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, that's still a one-dimensional thing. It's a little bit more robust than just picking one of those channels. Um, that should be a little bit of a red flag to you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it that you drew out that red flag. Paul, Ken talked about how there's this big problem. people, businesses chasing tactics and not having a plan. Why do you think that percentage is so high for small businesses specifically? Why don't they invest in a marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on all of these. Is it start with what Ken said? They've been burned,
Yeah.
and so they're like, "Well, I'm just not going to do anything," and it, they feel like it's a big expense, and it does cost money to put a good, effective strategy in place. And they goes back to they want to do something. That's their mindset, but they're constantly bombarded with emails and phone calls that about tactics. You need to do this, you need to do that, but that tactic may not fit in with their business or their strategy, which they don't have. But like if you're an accountant, you should probably have a presence on social media, but that's probably not where you should spend a lot of money, because I don't know about you, but I'm not going to go to Facebook. Well, I'm not going to go to Facebook anyway, but I'm not going to go to social media looking for an accountant. I'm just
I don't
not.
know if they do dancing videos or singing. I might be interested in them then.
Yeah, that would probably concern me. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think part of it, they're just constantly bombarded by all these, and we're going to touch on this in a little bit. I think all these vendors that they're selling tactics, and they're skipping over the whole strategy thing, because they're getting these emails and these phone calls and maybe something in the mail saying you need to do this. Everybody's doing this, and look at how great it worked for this one person. It didn't work for 5 million other person, but hey, worked great for this person over here. And I think a lot of it is that they don't understand the need for it, and through no fault of their own, because they're constantly being bombarded with all these other things. And it does take time and money. And like you said earlier, Ian, sometimes you have to take a step back and look at that bigger picture before you can effectively move forward.
Yep. Yep. I sometimes I feel like a marketing therapist for small business owners, because they come to me and they've probably come to you guys as well. I'd love to hear your stories of where they are standing on the edge. They're ready to jump off the bridge of I'm never marketing again, or I'm never doing this again. I'm never building a website. I'm never doing SEO. And it's because they've been burned. And I can tell you 100% of those times when we start to unpack that and create understanding and kind of guide them through okay, well, what happened? Let's walk through it, and let's see if there's not a better way that you can approach this, because you obviously feel the need to do this because you called us. But the thing I've always noticed is that there's never been a time when somebody's had a bad experience with a website developer because the website didn't meet their expectations, SEO expert who didn't create the ranking that they were expecting. This is very common in advertising, Google advertising, or any type of online advertising. They don't reach the expectations. And I can tell you 100% of the times, there's never been an overarching plan that has guided what they were going to do in any of those scenarios. And that to me is the biggest opportunity cost to them, because first of all, they invested, they didn't get what they were expecting, they feel burned. The second is the opportunity cost, where their business has now been stagnant and not moving forward in the way it could have with an investment that was done properly with an overarching marketing plan. And that's really sad, right? As a business owner, I feel their pain.
Well, there's a say, you're never standing still. You're moving forward or you're moving backwards, because if you're not doing anything, your competitors probably are. So you're moving backward. If you're not doing anything, you're probably moving backward.
Business gravity. There's gravitational pulls in our businesses that are either pulling us if we're not creating the momentum to move us forward, it seems. Ken, for most small businesses, they don't have the expertise in-house to achieve their marketing goals or to implement individual tactics. So they can either hire someone or they can partner with an outside agency. Can a business even effectively hire someone or choose an agency partner if they don't have a strategy? Why or why not? Maybe unpack that a little bit for us.
Well, I would say yes, they can hire an agency if they don't have a strategy, because the reason you may be hiring an agency and probably should be hiring an agency or you know, something similar, is because they will be able to help you put that strategy in place. So the key thing is you've got to be able to understand, and have enough working knowledge to vet people to see, are they a big picture thinker? Do they think about marketing as a system? And can they help you put together that marketing strategy? So yeah, absolutely, you can hire somebody to do that for you. They can be in-house, or you can hire an agency. The great thing about if you hire somebody in-house, they may have all the right skills. They may have done it for other businesses before. Um, there's a lot of cost that you carry with that, because now you have to have them be able to go transition after the strategy is defined and put in place. How is it going to be executed? And whereas if you hire a company that specializes in marketing strategy and has a deep understanding of it, that's an engagement. They can define a strategy that actually serves as a roadmap for you, whether you continue to work with that agency or not. Maybe all they do is focus on strategy. I know a lot of people, that's all they do. But now what you need to go get in place to execute on that strategy. So yeah, I think it's absolutely possible, and I think it's critical that the businesses think about hiring somebody to help them do this strategy. I mean, and it's not just marketing. I mean, they've got to have an understanding of business too, and if they have an understanding of your niche or of a broad range of industries, there are pros and cons there. I'm not going to debate that today, but I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think you can and you should do it.
Okay. One of the things that I just pulled out from what you said too, that I think is a good caution for people even looking to hire agencies is really, you said vet them. And I think that's really important because, again, because there's so many nuances to how marketing businesses market themselves and in a compelling way. I've seen it where we've taken over accounts where other agencies had been the marketing partner of these clients that are now ours. And what we find is there was no strategy. So even agencies, if they don't have a strategic mindset, a strategy first mindset, clients can sometimes either force them to do tactics first, or they don't have the agency itself doesn't have the internal skills to develop a strategy. So I think that's, when you're talking about vetting them, ask the questions, talk to existing clients of that agency and find out, did they develop a strategy? Has the strategy been working? What has it meant to your business? All of those kind of questions are really helpful. Yeah. Paul, I don't know if I was the first person to coin this term, but I've certainly used it an awful lot. Multi-vendor-itis. It's a real disease that we've seen in small business owners, and a lot of them fall into it. Again, it starts with the tactic first mindset, but can you explain what this is? And can you also share how not having a marketing strategy often leads to the business getting this illness, this quote unquote illness, when they hire, when they go down this path?
Well, yeah, it's basically hiring different companies, agencies, whatever term you want to use, to do different things. And it's a problem, and we're probably going to touch on this later, but it's a problem because there's a lack of collaboration. So that they hire this company to do their website, and this company to do their Google ads, and this company to do their social media and this and another company to do their SEO, and no one's communicating. So this person doesn't know what any of these other people are doing, and it goes back to a tactics first instead of a strategy first, because it's not the small business owner's fault, because this is not their area of expertise, and it shouldn't be. If it is their area of expertise, they should probably start a marketing agency. But they depend on these outside so-called experts to guide them in the right direction. But a lot of times they're just doing what's best for them. Okay, you hired this company to do to build your website, and they might be really good at building websites, but they don't know anything about SEO. Mm-hmm. And so that's never, considered in the whole process. And we've talked about this in the past. You can learn a lot about organic from Google Ads and vice versa, so that the two can and should work together. I'm not saying that Google Ads directly affects your organic rankings. It doesn't, but it can indirectly have an effect, and it can be used in your SEO strategy. And if you have 5 different companies or agencies doing 5 different things, then there's this disconnect that can't easily be overcome.
Yep. No, that's a good explanation of multi-vendoritis. Can you talk a little bit about why this is such a problem? Paul touched on it, but yeah. Why is having individual vendors focusing on individual tactics such a problem for the business owner?
It doesn't have to be, but it usually is. If you have somebody who has, a chief marketing role, and most small businesses don't have that, and you haven't assigned one of the vendors that you're working with to take on that role and make it crystal clear that, and with the expectations that everybody is playing under the overarching guidance of somebody who's acting as a CMO or fractional CMO, chief marketing officer, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And they're going to be lack of coordination. In some cases, you're going to be stepping on each other. Here's the thing that drives me nuts. There are a lot of marketing companies that will go build a website for you. They won't use your website. They'll build a website. That's where they're driving their traffic. Well, guess what? Yeah, they're maybe they're getting some results for you, but they're now competing with your website for SEO because they've created 2 different websites. And chances are they weren't smart enough to turn off no indexing. So Google's trying to crawl that website because they want to make themselves look as good as possible. So they probably didn't turn that off. And that kind of stuff. How would you know that? How would you even, you've got to have a certain set of questions. And unfortunately, you may have had to have been burned by somebody in the past to even be able to know to ask that question. And that's why I think, you really do need to go back to this whole idea of vetting and just having a deep conversation with somebody to understand, do they really understand the breadth and depth of marketing? So, but to get back, if there could be finger pointing. If somebody has the responsibility of writing blog posts, and somebody's doing SEO work, well, why isn't your website ranking? Well, it's because they're writing bad content. No, it's because you're not doing the technical SEO. I mean, they all have stakes to play. TV advertising, radio advertising versus digital. Again, if you don't have somebody overseeing and making sure that everybody's working in conjunction with one another, guess what you're going to miss, Ian?
I was hoping you'd say that term. Say it again.
Well, I'm going to say another one of my favorite terms, and that's amplification.
Yeah.
So force multiplier or amplification. Yeah. So it happens all the time. People are advertising in offline channels. They're advertising on, broadcast media. They're not driving people to their website, so they can't fully track the effectiveness of what those results are. And they don't even know if people are going to their website. So again, there's opportunity cost that's associated with that and missed opportunity costs. It makes it hard to report. Therefore, it makes it hard to determine return on investment really, and what are the channels that are working the best for you. So yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way. If there's a new term, relatively new term, it's come into prominence over the last 2 years. It's called the fractional CMO. I think a lot of businesses need to look for people who have expertise and an understanding of what a fractional CMO role is. Even if you pick a single marketing solution provider for all of your marketing needs, they need to have, and you need to understand who is going to be playing the role of being the fractional CMO for that. But even if it's within a company or multiple vendor type of approach, somebody still has to have that overarching vision and making sure that all the levers are being pulled in conjunction with and not fighting against one another.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I disagree on a little bit with you, Ken, is that if you were to put a business that has everything that you're talking about and they do exactly the same things and they both have a marketing strategy, and one is a multi-vendor approach and one is an integrated marketing system that's governed by a system, reported through a system, and is cohesive, as opposed to a multi-vendor approach, which isn't cohesive, no matter who's running it at the top, internal, external. Because I've seen both, and this is my observation, is that you lose out on, first of all, the results are poor if you go with a multi-vendor approach, because first of all, you're not integrating the things that were produced in one area into the other areas, right? And that's where a marketing system is so powerful, because you're actually reducing the costs. You're leveraging all of the resources and assets that you're creating in each area to create that force multiplier and amplification effect.
Right.
And that's where I see, and then the other side that I see businesses really struggling with, even with an internal person managing the external multi-vendor approach, is it's like herding cats, and they're not getting the lines of responsibility of you're accountable for this and you're accountable for this, rather than a cohesive, systematic approach, an engine that's running smoothly on its own. That's where I see the big disparity. And ultimately, it costs you way more, right? When you go to a multi-vendor approach, it will cost you way more to get what the equivalent is in a marketing system that's built and run to be cost effective and efficient.
I would say that, my answer to that is that my expectation of a fractional CMO, fractional chief marketing officer, is that they drop in the system, and that the reporting lines and the authority are crystal clear, so that there's only, if you have multi-vendor approach and you don't have, and look, it can't just be an internal person to manage all of the different contractors. They have to have deep understanding of marketing strategy and also the use and effectiveness of certain tactics. Then, you have multiple decision makers. Nobody, they may agree occasionally. They're often going to disagree with one another and say, no, my thing is best, because they're all trying to get a bigger slice of the pie. So I think, there are pros and cons. Like, not every vendor can deliver every single component of a marketing tactic, the set of marketing tactics that you've defined as a part of your strategy. But they need to be guided and controlled by that system and a systematic approach that's enforced through somebody serving as a fractional chief marketing officer.
Yeah, this is getting outside of our topic for today, but I actually think that the percentage, and I'm just going to make up a percentage, but it'll give you an idea of kind of how I've observed this in the corporate world, and then it's only accentuated more in the small business world, is that in the corporate world, I never, ever, ever saw or was a part of, and I was in several, probably 6 or 7 different organizations, Fortune 500 type organizations, where a marketing system was employed. The very first time I saw a marketing system employed was through duct tape marketing, which is a systematic approach to marketing. And I think it's a giant gap in understanding marketing at all levels of organizations, from MBAs to, other people. I think it's, so I'm just trying to actually add to that criteria of when you're interviewing businesses, agencies, is ask what their marketing system is. How do they employ a marketing system?
Oh,
Because I
absolutely.
think it's a huge gap.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
Paul, most owners will know if they haven't taken tactics before strategy approach. But what are some of the warning signs that might confirm that they've gone down this path?
Well, if they know that, they should ask themselves why they did that. That would be my, but look, if there's no direction, and like I said earlier, you're just throwing mud against the wall. You're trying this, trying that, and you're not measuring anything. It's ineffective if you're not adapting to, if you're not looking at what your competitors are doing and what's happening in your market, and you're not adapting to that. That would be an indicator. If you're just trying different things, then you have no objectives. And how does what you're doing fit with your business goals? If you can't answer those questions, then you have a tactic first strategy, which isn't really a strategy, but you're doing tactics without strategy. And we've talked about this in other podcasts as well, that if you don't have a strategy, then how do you know if what you're doing is effective, and how are you measuring that? And if you're not measuring things, or things can't be measured, and there's no direction, then you're definitely have tactics first.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, just looking at the time, that we should be wrapping up. I know I had a couple more questions to you guys, but maybe you can put them into this. Any parting thoughts on this topic for both of you? Start with Ken.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you brought up system, because I was going to bring it up here.
Oh, awesome.
Anyway, because marketing is a system. It's not, it's not, again, it's not a one-dimensional thing. It's critical. A lot of business owners, they can certainly contribute a lot to creating the marketing strategy. They have the passion. They know why they started the business. They've got a vision of who do they really want to be working with, kind of at a gut level. Sometimes that can serve you well, but usually you're going to get more out of it when you rely on data and make data-based decisions, and data-based, not database decision.
Yep.
Decisions based on data. There we go. So I think it's really important. Every business needs to look at this. They either need to outsource it, or at a minimum, if they don't outsource it, they need to have, I think they would be best served having somebody facilitate the marketing strategy, who knows what they're doing, who knows what a real marketing strategy is, understands the nature of the business, and would know, okay, if we want to accomplish this, if this is part of our strategic vision, that these are a set of tactics that make sense to potentially pull from, even if they're not going to be the implementation specialists. I think my personal bias, because this is what we do, is if you can find somebody who does both the strategy and the implementation, I think that's the biggest win, because there's not going to be anything lost in translation. And but it takes. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know between Paul and I bet I can't even tell you the number of hours that we spend every week educating ourselves, staying up to date with what's going on, getting certifications. We don't get certifications just to get certifications. We get the certifications because it gives us a deeper understanding and context, so that we have that context to put into place when we're looking at all of these different things. And like, if you look at a chart of all of the different marketing technologies that are out there, just check. If anybody has been paying attention to anything online lately, you've probably seen something about artificial intelligence, Chat GPT, OpenAI, any of that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? There are thousands of those tools and they're exploding. And some of them are going to be great and some of them are going to be crap. We pride ourselves on trying to stay up to date and monitor and leverage and test out and vet these tools, because we have the ability across supporting dozens of clients. We have the ability to experiment with some different tools to get the best tactical solutions wrapped in underneath the strategy that we've put in place.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to remember that a tool is a tool. A tool doesn't do anything for you. Like in this context, Ken, you were talking about how AI, there's some really cool stuff, and people, like, it's getting so much press. The funny thing is that if you don't know what you're doing with those tools, even from a tactical level, they won't help you achieve your tactical goals, and
Let
more
alone
so
your
your
strategy.
strategic goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Strategery.
Strategery. We make up new words on this podcast all the time.
I think Stephen Colbert's got that one.
Okay. Paul, any parting thoughts on this topic?
Well, yeah, this might sound more harsh than I mean it to be, but if you're talking to a marketing agency and they're trying to sell you tools and tactics and they don't talk about strategy, you should probably look elsewhere.
Yeah.
And if you're working or talking to a marketing agency and they do talk about strategy and you refuse to discuss that, then that's on you. And if you don't get the results that you wanted, that's on you because you didn't want to spend the time and effort on strategy.
And that's a great point, Paul. I want to add to that just real quick. Don't think strategy is a set of really pretty reporting dashboards. Or a really pretty website. Just because a website's pretty doesn't mean that it's going to load fast. So it's going to hurt you from an SEO perspective. It's going to confuse people.
A lot of times they won't load fast.
Yeah, it's
They
going to
didn't compress
confuse
their images or whatever.
Yeah, they didn't really have any messaging defined when they built the site. They just focused on pretty. And we, when we lose business, it's because people get pulled away by bright, shiny reporting dashboards or a really bright, shiny website. And I get it. It's tempting, but look beyond the surface.
Yeah. 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 My parting thoughts too for this topic. And I think I hope our listeners understood the difference between tactics, why you should put strategy before tactics. But I think if you get this concept as a small business owner, it will help save you from a world of pain and help you, if you take some of the tips about hiring agencies and things to look for in them, I think this will save you from a world of distractions with shiny marketing, the shiny marketing syndrome. From a world of pain, if you take a multi-vendoritis approach without a overarching strategic system. And I think this will serve you really well as small business owners. So this is a great place to wrap up. Thank you, Ken and Paul, for sharing your thoughts on this important topic. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope you found this topic valuable. Please share links to this podcast so that we can get the good word out there more and save fellow small business owners from marketing pain and help them get more marketing gain. Until next week, keep calm and market on.